Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we have Dr. Mike Kaufman. We moved him back from hour 3 to hour 1, so we have more time to discuss the important issues of the insane agenda of the globalists, and one of our globalists, of course, the usurper in the White House, Mr. Abominator himself. And I love the statement I made the other day, which is a recalled statement from a year or so ago from Mr. Putin, that negotiating with Obama is like negotiating with a pigeon that knocks over all the chess players or game players on the board, then craps on the board, and then struts around as if he's won the game. And we see that over and over again with green policies such as proliferating nuclear old technology, which creates the danger of a breakdown and release of nuclear materials, the proliferation of breeder reactors that create new nuclear weapons, and we'll be getting one of the doctors on from Physicians for Social Responsibility soon. And I can tell you the entire policy is also destroying the ecosphere because of the crazy policies. We should have safe hydrofracking, which we don't have now. We have chemical hydrofracking. We have blocked the XL pipeline because there's tons of oil in the oil tar sands, and with proper processing, it can be done very safely, especially with double type safe pipelines that make a rupture incredibly unlikely. And we have to understand that we need to have scrubbers so that they don't release sulfur dioxide or nitric oxide into the atmosphere, which are also dangerous to human and other health. And the fact that we should already be negotiating with our gas and other things with China so that we can supply them with energy across the Trans-Siberian pipeline system, which should have already been negotiated over the past 8 years. So this is insanity. The Obama administration's latest, of course, is the green kitty litter bombs that they created at the WIP reactor and at Hanford and elsewhere by the Department of Energy trying to go green. And Dr. Mike Kaufman, who's been a warrior in this fight, has stopped many times through Congress and the Senate crazy bills by our uninformed so-called legislatures. And, of course, we have Obama, who, as Hillary Clinton said last year at a dinner, doesn't have his hand on the till. He basically is, posing. He's a poser, posing when he hits a good basket shot behind the White House, or when he does a high kick when he gets a good golf swing. So we really have an actor pretending to be president part-time, except when on Tuesday mornings when he gets in the Situation Room and he says, "I'm really good at killing people." Wow. So, Dr. Mike, lots of stuff to talk about today. The environment is probably the top issue, but there's a lot of other issues dealing with Islam, dealing with the policies of immigration. I mean, you've dealt with many other issues, too, so let's go through the hit list and dissect it apart, because all of it ties back to their policy of population reduction, which is part of the Agenda 21. It is all tied back with the energy foolishness of the carbon footprint, which is all a lie. At the same time, they're geoengineering the upper atmosphere with nanoparticles, which are destroying the entomycorrhizia lichens. And you're a agronomist, a climatologist, tree and plant expert, so you know that as they put these nanoparticle aluminum, barium, thorium, and strontium particles in the upper atmosphere at 80,000 to 73,000 feet, they're destroying the forests, which increases the chances of major forest fires. They're destroying crops, and they're putting these heavy metals into people because they're paramagnetic, used for steering weather systems, creating geotectonic or volcanic events, and literally weaponizing planet Earth. And, I've explained this when we've had climatologists on, because I had first-hand knowledge talking with Dr. Isley, who set up the foundation under the World Constitution Parliament Association in 1958 under the UN, and a PhD as well, the owner of the Vitamin Cottage across western United States, and worked taking directly care of pilots flying out of Buckley and Peterson who were putting these nanoparticle craziness in the upper atmosphere with no discussions with our Congress or Senate. And basically, I don't think that even the idiot Obama has any clear knowledge of what's really going on. I think he gets talking points. That's why he always looks like a liar, because he just reads the talking points off his teleprompter, Suki.
I would agree with that. I mean, you can't really explain it any other way. How could he be wrong on so many things after pontificating that, for instance, that we're going to be able to keep our doctors and all the rest, knowing that you're not going to be able to, and that when the lie is finally exposed, as it was last winter, that he's going to look like an absolute fool. And that's not an isolated event. Almost everything that he has basically said that is absolutely true has been proven false, that he has been lying almost in everything that he has done through his tenure as president. It's just beyond belief that he expects or thinks that he's going to get away with this. And unfortunately, because we have basically a institution of propaganda called the mainstream media, that he has been, because they are protecting him like I have never believed that a sane human being could possibly do. And we have a major problem because he is destroying this nation. I thought he was doing it fast before in the first 4 years of his two-term presidency, but since he became president, was reelected, he has put himself on steroids and is basically trying to destroy this country faster than I think anything anybody thought was possible. Right. And he's doing it through lying. He's doing it through programs and so forth, like the climate national assessment that he put out last month, that is just so utterly wrong, destructive. Dissected, and then we can move on to everything from his policy toward Islam. Yes.
For example, our so-called president we put in place, Maliki, who's a Shiite, is actually getting an air force now from Iran, where the 100-plus MiG-26 jets were flown at the end of the Saddam Hussein regime. We have a situation where we have so-called ISIS, which is now the extreme elements, and we're actually backing up an alternative government, giving them armaments and Stinger missiles. I think they shipped another 74 Stinger missiles. These things are used to take down commercial airliners and to wage the kind of war which is really dangerous, including manpads, surface-to-air missile systems. We have an insane government, and they even have the nerve to tell the Russians, don't dare arm the pro-Russian people in Donetsk or Slavyansk that are being shelled by the coup government of Mr. Poroshenko, who happens to be called the Chocolate King, but in fact he's the king of whoredoms, literally whorehouses, and of weapon systems and of illegal drugs. This man is a criminal of the highest order, and this is a coup government. And of course the Europeans and our so-called NATO and the United States government backs this fool. And as a result, we're pushing the Russians step by step to an intervention where we think we're going to just bog the Russians down, but they're not going to let the port in Tarshish, which in Syria, go. And I heard an alternative report a couple of days ago we had from one of our people, Keith Davies, last Wednesday, who tried to say there was a deal being made behind the scenes between Turkey and Iran. Sure, there was a pipeline, which is January 2013. It doesn't mean they can't do business with Turkey, but certainly I don't think that Turkey, by any means, is going to be able to just operate willy-nilly without Russian intervention and Iranian intervention in the area. I think that this is a disaster where Turkey is a European Union member, where Europe is going to get far in deeper than they can extricate themselves. And, of course, they have a tinker toy military force, so it's always us that shoulder the entire burden of any military interventions, and our boys and our military equipment is going to take a very heavy hit when we take a first world power, Russia, on with their advanced weapon systems. We're going to get clobbered.
Yeah, I really think we are too, and I hope that doesn't happen. You know, I know you hope it doesn't happen either. But we have such an idiot. Either he is an absolute idiot, or he is so diabolically evil that he wants to destroy this country. And I mean, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that's exactly what he is.
We've had David John Oates on reverse speech, and I believe reverse speech is correct. That this man is a dissociative identity disorder, MPD, which is the only kind of person that the globalists put in power because they can manipulate and avatar them. It deals with the spiritual side of this issue, which means there's a demonic side. And you listen to the reverse speech, and Obama is right out of the pit. This man has been abused since the day he was a little boy. We need to pray for him because God loves him, even despite all of his sins that he's doing. In fact, if Obama came clean, he probably wouldn't live very long, but he'd certainly save a lot of people and stop a lot of havoc, because he is destroying the nation, and the dollar now is going to get clobbered probably in the next 6 months. And our foreign policy is like out of the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. It is. It's like you have to figure out now, which side is America on now?
Yeah, exactly.
You scratch your head and you just don't get it. You just don't get it. It's like, whoop, did we switch sides here? Where are we? We're allies now with Iran, believe it or not, arming the forces of the Maliki at the same time they're supporting the other government.
I remember when I lost my mind.
Not realistic what they're doing. And the people that have money can borrow money and buy and get more assets. And well, welcome back. And we have a whole bunch of integrated and locked together issues. And I just want to kind of just give a summary of them, because the first issue is we have incompetency. And the comments made at a dinner party about a year ago that have been stated by Gerald Celente in his reports last week, and he's fantastic. If you get past the explicative, deletive statements that he makes a bunch of curse words when he's explaining things, and he hits his big BS button once in a while, which is very frequently, actually. He's 100% smack on the target. And he quotes people, experts in geopolitics that I consider and respect as well. And you're one of the top experts that connects the dots between the environmental issues, the economic issues. I personally think that this big flood of illegals, and they put out these bleeding heart attitudes of like, this doesn't fix the problems to make an underclass of people here in this country. What they should be doing is trying to, number one, clean out the drug cartels, which we could do with our special forces. Number two, we should help the local forces, police forces in countries like Nicaragua and El Salvador, so you don't have to have an AK-47 at the McDonald's to go and buy a burger. We need to build homes and help people grow food in a climate which is probably better than ours, so these people don't have to travel the death train from Central and South America to get across Mexico, which, by the way, the Mexicans didn't allow for a long time, to let these people get here. And they have the delusion that somehow they're going to be taken care of when, in fact, and that over the last number of years since 2008, Obama's only succeeded in creating 95% of the new jobs are MIC jobs. If you're older and can't pay your taxes, you lose your home. If you can't pay your rent or your power, it's turned off. America is not a mollycoddling social state. It really isn't. And the rich and powerful can borrow money at enormously low rates to consolidate assets and make a buco bucks. So the rich and powerful are getting a hell of a lot richer and more powerful, where the average middle class are being decimated. And this is creating an even new giant underclass. I call it the gruel class, because that's the bowls of gruel they will receive from the so-called superstate. And that gruel class is to guarantee votes for the social manipulators, the progressive communists, which are really just globalists. They're global fascists that want to put everything under the stretched skin of nation-states, stretched over the superstructure of Earth Inc., run by a bunch of global fat cat bankers and super-rich billionaires, the Billionaire Club, that want to ultimately reduce the world population and human fertility, want to screw the environment up with things like Fukushima and geoengineering, want to poison the food with genetically modified food, aspartame and Splenda, and other nasties, and have absolutely no regard whatsoever for not only the human population here, but around the world, and are the primary promulgators of war, pestilence, and economic devastation, including lack of credit. So everybody worldwide, their credit is contracting. At the same time, bankers can always get leave for more money, including the derivatives, which are going to be exempted from the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the TTIP in Europe, where we lose all of our sovereignty and our federal government, our Congress and Senate become vestigial. They no longer have any physical probable reason to exist. And Obama doesn't even need to actually rule by making laws. He just rules by rulemaking and by changing attitudes and just by taking orders from the United Nations rather than Congress to start war. It's just disgusting what's going on, and it's all integrated into one big mess. And I think of Obama as just a teleprompter reader, Punch and Judy show. The guys behind the scenes are bankers snickering at their boardrooms.
Right, and even though Obama may be just a puppet for the puppeteers, the fact is that he is creating all of this misery, or the puppeteers are creating all of this misery. And what really astonishes me, Bill, is the fact that the American people, for the most part, can't see it. And the reason they can't see it is they have been brainwashed in their public education schools so that they basically believe what they're being told, even though they're beginning to see that it doesn't work. The fact is, most of them still believe it. It's beyond belief. If you read in Thessalonians that there's going to be this great delusion when Christ returns, and I think we're beginning to see the first indications of that right now. I
was reading last night the book on the Blood Moons with Mark Biltz, and he'll be back on the program. He's been on a number of times this year so far. And I think God's basically, the ultimate sign is we have a president, I call it Hananiah president, who is like the final judgment on America. I think that unless America repents, and I'm talking about the population, it's not the leaders. The leaders are symptoms like Adolf Hitler, Stalin, and Pol Pot and so on. These are symptoms of a population that will tolerate these kind of leaders.
Exactly.
And I'm talking about both parties, Republicans and Democrats. And when people wake up, we don't need a majority. We need a minority that's activated and finally will not put up with it any longer. Like the movie Network. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And what people need to understand is they're going to blow up our dollar. They want verification, which is called the authentication currency, which means all money is going to disappear. They want a massive surge of population into America, maybe 100 million. They made preferential moves, including under Obama, to bring in Muslims, especially Muslims that are bisexual or have sexual preference problems in their own home country will probably be executed. They will get first-class treatment here. And, of course, this open-door policy where people don't go through a proper vetting process to help them. I think that even if we had stations or places where people could live safely in their home countries, say El Salvador or elsewhere, I would not mind even contributing financially myself to keep them in their own country and help them. But the idea of flooding the country with illegals, especially that don't understand what America stands for, and I'm not talking about the crazy policies of always being a golem for Israel, which is the insane state that needs to be defanged, or the insane alliances with Muslim states, which are always evil. There's no such thing as a moderate Muslim, because if there was a moderate Muslim, they'd speak out against the extreme Muslims that are doing terror activity around the world.
So we're actually seeing that in Iraq right now. We're seeing basically that the so-called moderate Muslims are turning to violence.
Right, well, there's no such thing as a moderate Muslim.
Iraq area. Now, a lot of that's due to bad governance, but the fact is that eventually all Muslims must destroy you and I because we can't believe in Islam.
Right. Yeah, we're not dealing with a faith like, say, Mormonism, which can tolerate us, or a different form of Christianity, or Buddhism, or people that are Baha'i, the Baha'u'llah, that came hundreds of years ago, that's the incarnation of Jesus Christ. All these religions are what we call functionally tolerant. Even communism is functionally tolerant of the West, There really wasn't any real intention, and we can see the rise of the Eastern Orthodox Church in Russia, where Mr. Putin now is, quote, considered the titular geopolitical head of the Russian Orthodox Church. So we have a Christian in Russia, and we have an atheist, agnostic, Satanist, multiple personality disordered, avatared, evil fool, who probably basically, other than being able to read a teleprompter, has got clinical signs that he's got burnout from multiple use of illegal drugs. In the past, again, we've had 3 cocaine addicts, Bill Clinton, George Bush, and now this fool. And I think the statements by Mr. Putin, who doesn't even drink vodka, indicates just how burnt out Mr. Obama is in his capacity not to read or form an original thought when he doesn't have a good writer or can read his teleprompter.
Yeah, I concur with what you're saying. It's really disturbing. I mean, very, very disturbing that we're having this. It's very blatantly obvious to you and I. In fact, it was blatantly obvious back before he was elected president in 2008 that this is what was going to happen, and yet the average American citizen cannot see it.
Well, he's a pimple on the giant geopolitical abscess in the body politic of America. He's just the pimple on the surface. He is not the cause of it. We are the cause that we put up with this stuff. We're the cause when we buy lies about global warming and not fixing Fukushima and tolerating electropollution and all the other nasties that these fools promulgate on us. Welcome back. And Dr. Mike, let's go through the analysis of this environmental issue that you mentioned and then hit the high points of the other things that I kind of rambled about. But I want people to see the big picture. They need to get angry as hell about this, and they need to not stop attacking the ad hominem attacks against the person that says them, whether it's me or anybody else that speaks on this issue, or yourself or anyone else. What they need to do is kind of check out the facts themselves and then just figure out what they're going to do. Are they going to blog it on the internet? Are they going to get a call in to say this show and make their statement of their facts? And by the way, the number is 800-259-5791. We checked. The number does work. So if you call in 800-259-5791, you can make your statement worldwide, and we're now on Genesis Network phone apps worldwide. We're on K-band satellite North and South America. We're on Dish Network across Britain, Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, Russia, and China. And there's no excuses. A phone number worldwide they can dial into 8 times a day. They rebroadcast all 3 hours. We have free archives of MP3 and Listen Live. And then we also have our what's called live stream premium channel, which I'll be putting on daily blogs starting today. So that now starting the 1st of July, you're going to see daily video blogs on there going over the news and health news and other things. You can just hit the button and it's all free. There's no charge. So there's no excuse for you not voicing an opinion and saying, well, Get a blog. You can contact your congressman. Raise hell. Put statements on the side of your car when you're driving down the freeway. You got to do something, because if they blow the dollar apart, if they flood the nation with 100 million illegals, including people from Muslim countries, if they blow a terrorist bomb like a dirty bomb or nuke going off, and you have a police state and drones everywhere, because they now have airspace and FAA authorizability to have what they had at the what they call Captain America movie they had a few months ago. They opened the movie up with drones and robot warriors, swords they call them, operating in the streets of Tehran. And they were doing visual scans of people's retina scan to determine who they were and if they were safe or not, even through women through their little burqa. I mean, people don't understand what the hell is happening here, but we're moving to a very dark age if we don't smarten up. Very dark.
Well, that is very true. I really have been saying for several years now that if they are successful in doing what you just described, it will be a dark age that put the dark ages back in the first part of the 19th century, 18th century.
Right.
Whatever it was,
yeah.
To shame. I mean, it will be so bad. In fact, your comment about the dollar bill is probably going to happen no matter what we try to do to stop it at this point.
We started a war with Russia where we're trying to trash them, and we started to trash their billionaires, including the probably $40 billion that's now in Putin's bank accounts because he's not poor. And you don't tick off Russians. You make a deal with them. You show people with respect, although you have to, like Ronald Reagan before he had too many aspartame-laced jelly beans. You operate from a position of strength, and you get what you want out of it, and you make the other people treat like they're being treated with respect, but you also put them in their place. And we don't do that. We don't operate from a position of strength. We operate from a position of wimpiness. We operate from a position of incompetence. We don't operate to make America energy independent, to strengthen our borders, to train our kids to understand what America is. It's a few good rulings by the Supreme Court that says, no, you can't go and willy-nilly get people's cell phone calls or do recess appointments, Mr. Obama. I mean, he just does whatever he can get away with. And then finally, they're going to put a choke chain on this maniac. We have a situation now where we want to make sure the next maniac, which is probably Republican, isn't going to be a new version of Adolf Hitler. Because we could swing the other way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. That's the big danger that we have, is that we're so horrified about Obama that we elect a true fascist or something like that into office that will actually take us to the other extreme, and that's just as dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. So where I see this going is not good. So let's go through that environmental report.
Yeah. One of the things that has happened over the last few months, actually since the start of the year, is that the United Nations IPCC has come out with its fifth report. It's done 5 of them since 1990. And this one was especially bad. I mean, all of them have been very bad. All of them have been very biased. But let me just give you an idea of how bad it really is. There were a number of lead authors in that process that have quit because of the disgusting nature of how corrupt this process is. What actually happens is that the scientists actually provide some decent information to the United Nations. Now, it's selected. Understand that the information even going into this report is biased in the sense that anything that is contrary to it is kept out. But at least what is going into it is decent. Is kind of science. I won't blame that science. But what happens is that the way it's structured, in order to write these reports have to be reviewed by the individual governments. And the individual governments can change or emit anything that they want to. Anything. In fact, by the time it comes out for the world to see it, it has no relationship to the original documentation at all. It's purely a political, dogmatic document that is there to prove that man is causing global warming. So anything you get out of the IPCC reports is false. You're an idiot if you even look at it to try to get an idea of what's happening in the world.
Well, we know that we had on the experts from about East Anglia University, because one of our experts up in Victoria, British Columbia, talked about this. And you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, back in 2009.
Right.
And actually 2010 and 11, but
2009
is when it started.
They stopped data acquisition in northern latitude stations so that they would then make the data look like it shifted toward global warming.
Right.
They created a model.
Let me just interrupt and paint a picture for the people here.
Yeah.
If you have an equal distribution of weather stations that are measuring temperature in, say, the Carolinas and Mississippi and so forth, up in Alaska, they balance out and they give you a kind of a picture of what the northern hemisphere is going to be like. If you eliminate 80% of those in Alaska and keep all of them down in Mississippi and North Carolina and so forth, what happens is that you have a jump of temperature almost of a degree. And that is exactly NOAA has done. Exactly what NOAA has done. It basically kept all of its southern stations, eliminated 70-80% of the northern stations, and said, look, this is global temperature. Well, it wasn't. It was a manufactured effort to create the image of global warming.
Right. In fact, I remember my statistics professor many years ago. He said, I'm going to teach you how to use statistics and probability math, which I learned how to do multilinear regression analysis, all kinds of things for data, which I did in a number of studies. And he said, there's lies, damn lies, and then statistics. And if you screw with the data acquisition, if you don't do, if you have a polymorphic population, if you have models that don't include dirt and drivers, whether you're using Pascal or some kind of modeling language that is a nonlinear modeling language for computer modeling, which they did, you basically have a model of something that never existed. And that's what these fools have done. And they did it on purpose, and they know damn well they've actually pulled drivers out that don't exist in the real world.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely they have, and that's the problem both with the IPCC report as well, because the only thing that they have in the United Nations and the IPCC to justify the fact that man must be causing global warmings are these climate models. There's over 100 of them, and in the recent article that I'm writing right now, that'll be published next month, but they basically have 100 models that are anywhere from 2 to 3 degrees warmer than the actual temperature today. I mean, it's just unbelievable that there is only two of those 100 models that actually even come close to what has actually happened on Earth itself as far as temperatures to date. In other words, if you look backwards, they all overestimated the temperature by factors of 3 or 4. I mean, it's beyond belief, and yet that is what the IPCC is using to claim that man is causing global warming. It is unbelievable. I know I sent you one of those graphs just before we got. I don't know if you have a chance to look at it, Bill, but the fact is...
Was that over my Hotmail or Gmail account?
Gmail, I think.
Gmail, yeah. I'll have a look at that. When we come back, we'll talk about a couple of drivers that I want to just throw out and see what you think about them, but we'll talk about it on the break. And come back in just a minute. Call in if you have questions with Dr. Mike Kaufman, Ph.D., climatologist and expert on global warming, geopolitics, on Islam, and much, much more. We'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned. 800-747 American. Welcome back, and I threw out a number of different drivers for climate, but what I see basically, if I was going to say all these drivers are pushing us toward what I call the word famine. And it turns out, of course, that the ancestor to, if you want to call it, the tribes of Moses and Aaron, etc., and we call Ephraim and Manasseh, which of course became the tribes of the Aaronic priesthood, its own, which are my ancestors, that Joseph gave the prophecy to the king. He became what's called the satrap of Egypt, and to try to get them through 7 years after their vision of the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, 7 years of great plenty, and then 7 years of famine. Well, I think we are heading in toward the 7 years of famine, and the destruction of the ozone layer is the worst. The surge of methane hydrates, which can cause out of control, even with decreased sunspots, major increases in temperature that can occur, which are not caused by human, cause CO2. The destruction of the ozone layer by nanoparticles to geoengineer the weather and to create the ultimate space shield. I mean, I was watching a program called The Americans, and their ultimate first season show, which is last year, tried to make the statement that the Russians were really in a panic over the fact we were years ahead and could stop all their missiles. The fact is, the missile to hit a missile, which is not Patriot, but the Theater Air Defense, or THAAD system, which I became fully classified, cleared, at Q level, which is the same level as this president, and have exquisite knowledge of pretty well every aspect of it, will not work for another 30 years plus, and cost $75 trillion with a T, not billion, $1 trillion. So this is an enormously big black hole. But the system that will work, that works very efficiently, is nanoparticle plasma interferometry in the upper atmosphere, and it knocks out 100% of missiles, and it's a completely fail-safe system, but it poisons the planet and weaponizes the planet. And so America's done this. We have prescient control of all missile systems on Earth right now. We have space-based weapon platforms. We got all kinds of stuff in space that is just whiz-bang crazy. And it's destroying the planet, and people need to get a kind of a life and realize that the Russians are completely outclassed on this, and so are the Chinese. They don't understand what's going on. They don't understand that the leaders don't care if they screw with the environment, destroy the oceans, and kill human life and other life forms on the planet with heavy metals, etc., and destroy the ozone layer, which will kill crops. I mean, 45 minutes,
yes.
75% drop in the level of ozone protection, and your wheat crop, your corn crop, is gone. You don't even need it to last more than lunch. If it lasts 1 hour for 1 day, all of your crops that season are toast. They turn literally to white, just like the Bible says.
Yep. And that is, we're not speculating here. That could happen if what you're saying does happen.
Well, we already know it. We have reports of we got the heavy metal analysis from Lake Shasta. Right. People are making movies on it that shows you that we have here Lake Shasta, which is in California. It doesn't have an upwind, aluminum smelter. We don't have any heavy industries putting out nanoparticle thorium, strontium, or barium. What we have right now is geoengineering by the United Nations and globalist maniacs that don't even consult global, national governments. And of course, I don't think our president has full clearance or even a knowledge of this. I don't think our congressmen and senators, even in these special committees that deal with military hardware, etc. I think that the corporations and the globalists are bankers and people sitting around, billionaires, literally steering the levers of power, and they could give a rat's behind. Even if the United Nations is fully informed, they use them just as a kind of geopolitical shield. And the governments, they use almost like using a prostitute to accomplish a specific goal, and that's it.
Yep. Let me just throw in another angle to this, because I'm not as familiar with what you're talking about as other areas. I'm a climatologist by training, my PhD and so forth. And one of the things that bothers me about the National Climate Assessment, if you look at the cover, it shows a picture of the United States, and it's almost bright red. Why? Because the temperature they're forecasting to go up by 1.5 degrees here in the very near future.
Right.
Well, NOAA has actually manipulated the data. They have made adjustments for decades now to the data, which depresses the actual temperature. And when I finally get this thing published, you'll see what I'm talking about. If you take the actual data, actual climate data, and then as zero on a graph, and then how the adjusted data that NOAA does actually depresses it by over a degree down in the early part of the 20th century. And then you start to see it shooting up towards the end of the 20th century until finally it's above the zero line in the last 10 or 15 years. It's absurd.
Yeah,
it's nothing but a mathematical construct. It has nothing to do with real world temperatures whatsoever, and yet they're using that to claim that we're going to see, we're actually experiencing more than a degree increase in temperature the last 100 years and another degree and a half the next 50, 60 years. Because of the mathematics that they're using, it is just unbelievable how arrogant and how corrupt this process is. And then when you actually look at the real data, what you're seeing is that the last 10 or 15 years, actually almost 20 now, that we're seeing a depression in global temperatures. If you look at the real temperature data, not the stuff that they have manipulated, but the temperature data as it comes off of weather stations and so forth, what you're seeing is about a 0.3 of a degree drop in global temperatures in the last 10 to 15 years. Now, if you extrapolate that out and you look at what's happening with the sun and the electromagnetic spectrum of the sun, the fact that we're going to have very few sunspots in the next cycle, 11-year cycle, what you're seeing here is that we will be going into a potential Dalton minimum. Now, what does that mean? It basically means if you go back to the 1700s, what happened is the same thing happened back then, and we're following exactly the same process right now. That's what scares me, is exactly the same sequence of events that are happening then are happening again today. There was a drop of almost 3 degrees in a matter matter of just 50 years or less. And what we're seeing now is that many of the solar scientists, not the climatologists necessarily, but the solar scientists, are saying that if we're heading back into a Dalton minimum, by the year 2020, that's just 6 years from now, we could drop almost a full degree in temperature. A full degree. Now, what does that mean? Well, you're not going to notice on a day-to-day basis because 1 degree, who notices that? But what happens is that you have frost later in the summer and then earlier in the fall. And what happens to crops with frost? They die. And this is what the biggest problem was back in the 1700s, is that you had massive, massive starvation because we could not grow the crops necessary. Now we have new technology and so forth, but I don't think it's going to be enough to feed the world of 7 billion people if we get into that particular situation. That is really, really a very serious problem. One that I think you need to be prepared for mentally, although we don't know if it's going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen, and I know Dr. Bill doesn't hopes that too.
I'm not hoping it to happen, but I look at it soberly. It ties in with the lie about genetically modified foods and things like pesticides like Roundup, which actually doesn't increase food production, and monocrops increase the chances of how monocrop can be destroyed. So what I see is famine coming. And I see a number of drivers. Firstly, I think we're going to head toward an ice age, a mini ice age. We call it a Dalton minimum type, a Maunder ice age. But I think also we're likely to have out-of-control surge of methane hydrates as there increased volcanism and increased release of methane in not only Alaska, but around the world, which is occurring at the same time Antarctica is expanding and the ice areas are increasing. There's increased methane hydrates. But the ultimate danger, I think, isn't even the temperature change. It's the destruction of the ozone layer. If there's a major surge of radioactive gases, either from a nuclear war, it's not the particles that are going to cause a nuclear winter. It's the gases and materials that are going to destroy the ozone layer. And if that happens, it'll, even just for a day, it'll wipe out crops for that year. And of course, the isotopes are going to also persist. We're now seeing we're past 100... the 100-day mark, the 1,000-day mark. So now, cesium-137, strontium-90, and so on are going to start bioaccumulating in crops, especially in meat crops because they're higher on the food chain. They're going to accumulate in the oceans, especially the Pacific. And as they start killing off the oceans, you're going to start seeing an increase in things like New Zealand jellies that don't require oxygen. You're going to start seeing a lot more filter feeders concentrating radiotoxins, which is why the Chinese won't accept in Canada or the United States any of our filter feeders, scallops and mussels, etc. So, by the way, Dr. Mike, I wanted to talk about the geopolitical stuff when we come back in hour 3. Can you come back and say partway through hour number 3 today at around 5:15 your time?
Well, I can sure try to. Let me give you out my website in the meantime. It's AmericaPlundered.com. You'll see a lot of information there. AmericaPlundered.com.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll post up the links. I want to get your take on the surge of immigrants, Islam, and tie in with the population control, the crash of the dollar, and the move toward an authentication cashless currency, which are testing rate this week in Britain. All of these things are happening, and it's not a joke, and we're permitting it, and that's why it's happening.
Yep.
Back in a moment with Hour 2, our Health and Wellness, Hour 3, Tim Alexander, and we'll try to get Dr. Mike back on.